Hey guys, tonight we are heading into the glittering, treacherous world of a royal palace. We are not going to be the emperor or a noble consort, though we are going deep behind the silken curtains, into the shadows of the throne room, to explore the life of a palace eunuch. It is a story of profound contradictions, of immense, often hidden power, and of a deep, personal loss that can never be regained. It is a life of whispered secrets, intricate rituals, and unimaginable sacrifice. Frankly, given the entry requirements, it is a life most of us would, and should, run from. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, I love to see where you are all listening from. Drop your city and the time in the comments below. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let us ease into tonight's journey together. Your world is small, and it smells of damp earth and wood smoke. You live in a cramped, one-room hut with your parents and a tumble of younger siblings. The floor is dirt. The roof leaks when it rains. The most constant feeling you have is a dull, persistent ache in your stomach. It is the feeling of hunger. Every day is the same cycle of back-breaking work in the fields for your father, of your mother trying to stretch a handful of grain into a meal for the whole family, and of the gnawing certainty that winter will be even harder. One evening, your father comes home and does not eat his small portion of watery gruel. He just sits in the corner, his face a mask of defeat. He and your mother speak in low, urgent whispers after they think you are asleep. You hear words like drought, no harvest, and perilous. Then you hear a term that makes your mother let out a quiet, choked sob. It is the sound of a heart breaking. A few days later, your father takes you aside. He does not look you in the eye. He tells you that you are a good son, a filial son, and that you have a chance to save the family. You will go to the capital. You will work in the palace of the emperor. You will eat your fill every day. You will wear silk. You will never be hungry again. He doesn't have to. Even as a young boy, you have heard the stories. You know what it means to be a clean man in the service of the emperor. This is the grim, mainstream historical reality for the vast majority of palace eunuchs, particularly in Imperial China. While a few were captured in wars or were punished criminals, most came from desperately poor families. Sending a son to be castrated and enter palace service was seen as an ultimate act of filial piety. It was a son's sacrifice of his own body and his own lineage to ensure the survival of his parents and siblings. It was a brutal economic decision, born of a level of poverty we can barely imagine. Your mother gives you a small, hard rice cake for the journey. Her hands tremble as she pushes it into yours. That is your goodbye. Your father walks with you for miles to the nearest town. He doesn't say a word. There, he hands you over to a man with cold, assessing eyes. Money changes hands. A few coins that represent an unimaginable sum to your family, and an insulting pittance for what you are about to give up. Your father turns and walks away, and he never looks back. Now for a specific, and chillingly bureaucratic detail. This process was often not a direct transaction between a family and the palace. A grim cottage industry existed around it. The man your father paid was likely a broker, or a knifear himself, a specialist known as a daw zaijiang. These men performed the dangerous surgery for a fee. For poor families, it was a high-stakes investment. They had to pay the surgeon, and if you survived the procedure and the perilous recovery period, the family might receive a stipend or a position of favor. It was a cold, calculated business, turning a desperate family's hope into a professional service. This brings us to a point of historical and ethical debate. What was the agency of the boys themselves in this decision? The historical record, almost always written by educated elites, portrays you as a passive victim, a piece of property sold by your family. And in most cases, this was likely true. But some historians wonder if the reality was more complex. In a world of limited options, could a bright, ambitious boy from a starving village see this as his only chance for social mobility? Could he have, in some way, chosen this path, seeing it as a route to a life of importance rather than a slow death in the fields? It is a difficult question. The psychology of a child facing such a stark choice is almost impossible to recover from our sources. We are left to wonder if, beneath the tragedy of coercion, there was ever a flicker of desperate, personal ambition. For now, though, you are just a terrified boy. You are taken to a small, dark room in a back alley of the capital. It is bare, except for a bucket and a wooden plank bed. You are given a last full meal. You are told to drink as little as possible. You know what is about to happen. The door closes, and you are left alone in the suffocating silence, waiting for the man with the knife. Your old life is over. Your new one is about to begin, with an act of terrible, irreversible violence. The door to the small, windowless room creaks open. The man who enters is not your father, not a doctor, but the specialist, the Dao Zaijiang. His face is impassive, his movements practiced and efficient. He is not here to offer comfort. He is here to perform a job. With him are two assistants, large men whose only role is to hold you down. Fear, cold and sharp, paralyzes you. There is no escape. You are forced onto a low bench. Your trousers are cut away. The knife are as assistants pin your arms and legs. Their grips like iron. You are a trapped animal. The knife R begins his preparations. There is no anesthetic, no concept of sterile procedure. The room smells of dust, fear, and a faint, sharp odor of cheap wine, which might be used to clean the blade, but more likely is for the surgeon's own nerves. The tools are laid out on a dirty cloth. The primary instrument is a small, curved knife, its blade honed to a razor's edge. The knife R recites a few rote phrases, part prayer, part legal disclaimer. He asks you one last time if you consent and if you will regret this. Your yes is a choked, terrified whisper. It is a formality that means nothing. The decision was made for you long ago. Then, the procedure begins. It is an act of swift, brutal precision. In a single, fluid motion, the knife R removes both the penis and the scrotum. The pain is a blinding, white-hot explosion that obliterates all thought. It is a pain so absolute, so all-consuming, that your scream is a raw, wordless sound torn from the deepest part of your being. This procedure, known as Jingzhen, or clean castration, is the stark, unvarnished historical reality of becoming a palace eunuch in many periods of Chinese history. While some eunuchs in other cultures or eras might have undergone less extreme forms of castration, this complete removal was the standard for ensuring the absolute chastity of those serving in the inner palaces, particularly in the Ming and Qing dynasties. It was the most effective way to eliminate any possibility of sexual function. Immediately after the cut, the knife or S next action is critical to your survival. A small pewter plug or a goose quill is inserted into your urethral opening. This is to prevent the wound from healing shut as it swells, which would make urination impossible and lead to a swift, agonizing death from a burst bladder. The wound is then covered with paper soaked in cool water or sometimes with a poultice of ash, which was believed to have absorbent and antiseptic qualities. Now for a truly bizarre and macabre detail of the process. What happens to the parts that were removed? They were not simply discarded. They were carefully preserved. They were placed in a small jar of alcohol, a process known as the rising. This jar, containing what was called your bow, or treasure, was of immense importance. It was your proof of identity. When you entered the palace, you had to present your bow to the head eunuchs for inspection. It was your certificate of castration. Furthermore, it was believed that when you died, you had to be buried with your bow to be considered a whole man in the afterlife. So this small, gruesome jar would become one of your most precious possessions, a tangible symbol of everything you had lost. This practice leads to a debate among historians and anthropologists about the psychology of eunuchs. Was the preservation of the bow a source of constant, painful reminder of their mutilation? Or was it a form of psychological compensation? Some scholars argue it was a cruel, institutionalized way of reinforcing their otherness and their loss. Every time you saw that jar, you were reminded of your incompleteness. Others suggest it was a complex coping mechanism. By treating the severed parts as a treasure, it reframed the loss. It became a sacred object, a key to your new life and status, and your ticket to wholeness in the next life. It transformed an act of brutal mutilation into a kind of holy relic. The debate centers on whether this was a tool of psychological oppression or a sophisticated, if grim, form of psychological adaptation. The pain has subsided from a blinding white light to a throbbing, all-encompassing universe of agony. You are tightly bound from your chest to your knees to prevent you from moving or touching the wound. You are helped to your feet by the assistants and forced to walk around the small room for 2 or 3 hours, a measure believed to prevent you from going into shock. Then, you are laid down on a slanted plank bed. You are not allowed to drink anything for 3 days. The real test has just begun. The knife was the beginning. Now, you must survive the aftermath. The 3 days following the surgery are a hazy, timeless blur of pain and thirst. You lie on the hard plank, your body wrapped so tightly you can barely breathe. Every beat of your heart sends a fresh, throbbing wave of agony through your lower body. The room is kept dark and close, the air thick with the smell of your own sweat and the metallic tang of blood. You are watched constantly by the knifear or his apprentice. Their job is not to comfort you, but to ensure you do not die before their work is officially done. The most acute torture is the thirst. You are forbidden from drinking even a single drop of water. This was a critical part of the traditional post-operative care. The belief was that any fluid intake would lead to urination, which was thought to be too dangerous in the first few days when the wound was fresh and the swelling at its peak. So you suffer from a desperate, agonizing dehydration. Your mouth is a desert. Your tongue feels thick and swollen. Your lips crack and bleed. You drift in undoubt of a delirious state, tormented by visions of cool, clear water. Surviving this initial period is the first great hurdle, a life-or-death trial by dehydration and infection. This is the unsparing historical reality. The mortality rate for this procedure was shockingly high. Without antibiotics, proper sanitation, or an understanding of germ theory, the risk of infection was astronomical. Tetanus, gangrene, and septicemia were common and almost always fatal. It is estimated that a significant percentage of boys, perhaps as many as 1 in 5 or even higher in some periods, did not survive this recovery phase. Your life hangs by the thinnest of threads. On the 3rd day, The bindings are removed. This is the moment of truth. The pewter plug or goose quill is taken out of your urethra. You are then ordered to urinate. This is the single most terrifying moment of the entire ordeal. If you can urinate, it means the passageway is open. You will live. If you cannot, it means the urethra has swollen or healed shut. You will die a slow, excruciating death as your bladder fills and eventually ruptures. You stand over a bucket, your legs trembling with weakness. You strain. Every muscle in your body tenses. For a moment, nothing happens, and a cold dread, even worse than the pain, washes over you. And then, a trickle. It is weak, hesitant, and accompanied by a searing, burning pain that makes you cry out. But it is a stream. You are alive. The knifer gives a grunt of satisfaction. His job is complete. His investment is secure. Now for a slightly less dramatic, but equally miserable, long-term detail. The removal of the external genitalia fundamentally and permanently alters the way you urinate. You no longer have the control or the anatomy to produce a neat, direct able stream. For the rest of your life, you will suffer from some degree of incontinence. Urination becomes a messy, spraying affair. This is why older, wealthier eunuchs often had specially designed toilets and would wear thick, absorbent padding or silk cloths stuck into their clothing. The constant dampness and the smell of stale urine became an inescapable part of your physical reality, a private, lifelong humiliation that no amount of silk robes or palace prestige could ever truly hide. This physiological consequence has led to a debate among historians about the social dynamics within the eunuch community. How did they manage this shared, embarrassing problem? Some scholars suggest that it created a unique kind of bond. They were the only ones who truly understood this specific, intimate aspect of each other's lives. It was a shared secret that set them apart from the whole men and women of the palace. The hierarchy within the eunuch community might have even been reflected in how one managed this issue. The ability to afford fine silks for padding or to have junior eunuchs assist with cleaning would have been a significant status symbol. Others argue that it was a source of constant shame and anxiety, even among themselves, potentially leading to cruel jokes or bullying directed at those who had more severe problems with incontinence. It was another layer of vulnerability in a life already defined by it. The debate explores whether this shared physical defect fostered a sense of solidarity or created another painful axis of hierarchy and shame within their closed society. You are finally given a bowl of thin rice congee. It is the most delicious thing you have ever tasted. You spend the next month or so in this small room, slowly recovering. Your wound begins to heal, leaving a puckered, unnatural scar. You learn to walk again. Your gait subtly but permanently changed. You are weak, emaciated, and deeply traumatized. But you are alive. You have passed through the first gate of hell. Now, you must prepare to enter the gilded cage of the Forbidden City. After 100 days of healing, you are deemed ready. The knifer takes you to a specific gate of the palace, the place where new recruits are processed. Here, you hand over your most precious and grotesque possession, the small jar containing your bow, your treasure. The senior eunuchs of the Department of the Palace Treasury inspect it, verify its authenticity, and record it in a ledger. The jar is then stored away. You are now officially a palace eunuch. You are given a new name, a new set of clothes, a simple silk tunic and trousers, and you are led through the towering red gates into a world of bewildering scale and complexity. The Forbidden City is not just a palace. It is a city within a city, a labyrinth of courtyards, halls, and private residences, all connected by a web of walkways and governed by an invisible but ironclad set of rules. Your first and most important job is to learn these rules. Forgetting them or breaking them can lead to a beating. Or worse, you are assigned to a group of other new arrivals, all boys like you with the same haunted look in their eyes. Your teacher is a senior eunuch, a man with a stern, unreadable face and a thin switch made of bamboo that he is not afraid to use. Your education is not in literature or mathematics. It is in the science of palace survival. The first lesson is about walking. You cannot just walk. You must learn to glide, your feet making no sound on the stone pavements. You must walk with your head bowed and your eyes downcast. Looking directly at a member of the imperial family is a grave offense. You learn to navigate the vast complex by looking only at the ground in front of you. The second lesson is about speaking. You learn to speak in a specific, high-pitched, and deferential tone. Your own voice, which is not yet broken, will eventually settle into the unique, soft timbre of a caster too. You are taught to never raise your voice, to never speak unless spoken to, and to use a complex vocabulary of honorific and self-deprecating terms. You do not refer to yourself as I, but as Nu Kai, meaning your slave or your servant. This system of oppressive etiquette is a core historical feature of life in the imperial court. It was designed to constantly reinforce the absolute, godlike status of the emperor and his family, and the utter subservience of everyone else. Every gesture, every word, was a performance of humility and obedience. For a eunuch, this performance had to be flawless. Now for a specific and deeply paranoid detail of these rules. One of the most important things you learn is what not to know. You are trained to have selective hearing, unselective sight. If you are in a room and you hear the emperor and a consort having an argument, you must later be able to swear, under pain of death, that you heard nothing. If you see a high-ranking official slip a piece of paper to a palace lady, you saw nothing. You learn to be a piece of furniture, an inanimate object that can perform tasks but has no memory, no opinions, and no senses of its own. Your survival depends on your ability to be deaf, dumb, and blind at the right moments. This cultivated ignorance was a vital survival skill. This leads to a fascinating historical debate about the role of eunuchs as information brokers. The official idea was that they were supposed to be these neutral, unthinking servants. But was that the reality? Many historians argue that, despite the risks, eunuchs were the central nervous system of the palace, because they were everywhere, in the bedchambers, the audience halls, the kitchens. They saw and heard everything. They knew who was in favor and who was not, who was sleeping with whom, who was plotting against whom. A powerful eunuch who could skillfully collect, filter, and use this information could become incredibly influential. They could make or break the careers of court officials, influence imperial decisions, and amass huge fortunes. Other scholars argue that this view of the all-powerful, scheming eunuch is a stereotype, often promoted by the very court officials, the Confucian scholar bureaucrats, who saw them as their natural rivals. They contend that the vast majority of eunuchs were just what they appeared to be: terrified, overworked servants. For every one eunuch who successfully played the Game of Thrones, there were thousands whose primary concern was simply getting through the day without a beating. The debate is over whether the master spy was the exception or the rule in the eunuch community. You spend your days practicing. You walk endlessly up and down a courtyard, trying to perfect the silent, gliding step, You practice bowling until your back aches. At night, you and the other boys huddle together in a cold, communal dormitory, whispering the complex family trees and titles of the Imperial clan to each other, trying to memorize the thousands of details that could mean the difference between life and death. You are learning the choreography of power, a dance where a single misstep means you fall and never get up again. The physical wound may have healed, but the psychological reshaping has just begun. After your initial training in the palace's unwritten laws, you are assigned a master. You will not be serving the emperor or a high-ranking consort. Not yet. You are a little eunuch, the lowest of the low, and you must start at the bottom. You become the apprentice, the shadow, of a senior eunuch. This relationship will define your entire future. Your master, or Shifu, is a man in his 40s. He has been in the palace since he was a boy, just like you. His face is a network of fine lines, his eyes perpetually tired but missing nothing. He might be the head of a small section, perhaps in the laundry department or the imperial kitchens. His temper is unpredictable. He might be kind one moment, offering you an extra piece of fruit, and cruel the next, delivering a sharp slap for a minor mistake. This master-apprentice system was the fundamental structure of eunuch society within the palace. It was a practical way to pass down institutional knowledge and a way to form alliances in a dangerous world. A good master would teach you the practical skills of your new trade, but more importantly, he would teach you whom to fear, whom to flatter, and whom to avoid. Your very survival depends on his guidance. Your duties are menial and endless. You wake before dawn to fetch water for your master. You help him dress, ensuring his robes are perfect. You follow him throughout the day, a silent, ever-present assistant. You learn by watching. You watch how he bows to a passing concubine, how he speaks to a palace guard, how he bargains with a supplier for the kitchens. Every interaction is a lesson. He is teaching you the intricate web of favors, grudges, and debts that holds the palace together. Now for a specific and deeply personal aspect of this relationship. In this world devoid of genuine family, the master-apprentice bond often became a substitute for the father-son relationship you were forced to leave behind. You are expected to show your master absolute filial piety. You serve him his tea. You massage his aching shoulders at the end of a long day. In return, if he favors you, he becomes your protector. If another eunuch tries to bully you, your master will defend you. If you get into trouble, he will use his connections, his ganzi, to try and save you. He is your only family in this gilded prison. But this family bond was fraught with peril and is a subject of historical debate. Was this relationship primarily one of mentorship and protection, a humane adaptation to an inhumane world? Some sources and anecdotal accounts suggest that genuine affection and loyalty could develop. A master might take real pride in his apprentice's success, seeing it as a continuation of his own legacy. When the master grew old and retired, a successful apprentice was expected to care for him, ensuring he had a comfortable end to his life. However, many historians argue that this relationship was often deeply exploitative. The power dynamic was completely one-sided. A cruel master could abuse his apprentice physically and emotionally with impunity. The apprentice was, in essence, his personal slave. He could be forced to do the most demeaning tasks, take the blame for the master's mistakes, or even be sold or traded to another senior eunuch if it was politically advantageous. The debate centers on the prevalence of these two models. Was the caring, paternal master the norm, or a rare exception in a system that was inherently built on power and exploitation? Was the family, a genuine comfort, or just a more intimate form of servitude. Your master is a demanding teacher. One day, you are tasked with serving him tea. You fill the cup just a little too full, and a single drop spills on the saucer. Without a word, he picks up his bamboo switch and brings it down hard across the back of your hand. The pain is sharp and stinging, but it is the shame that burns more. He tells you, his voice low and cold, in this place, a drop of tea can be a tidal wave. An emperor's mood can change with the temperature of his soup. Perfection is not goal. It is the bare minimum for survival. You bow your head, cradling your stinging hand, and whisper, "This slave understands." You learn your lesson. You learn that attention to detail is everything. You learn to anticipate your master's needs before he is even aware of them himself. You become an extension of his will. You are his hands, his feet, and his eyes. You are learning to be the perfect servant, a role that requires you to erase yourself completely. And you know that your only hope of ever rising in this world is to first become the best, most invisible shadow he has ever had. Your apprenticeship is a lesson in humility, and your first real job is designed to grind every last scrap of pride out of you. You are assigned to the department of palace grounds, and your primary duty is sweeping. From the first gray light of dawn until the last rays of sun have faded, you sweep. The Forbidden City is an endless expanse of stone courtyards. Your world shrinks to the size of your broom, a simple bundle of bamboo fronds tied to a long stick. In the vast, empty squares of flagstone, you start in one corner of a massive courtyard, the same size as a modern public plaza, and you begin the methodical, back and forth rhythm of your work. Your task is not just to sweep away the dust in the occasional fallen leaf. Your task is to achieve a state of perfect, almost sterile, cleanliness. A senior eunuch might inspect your work by dropping a silk handkerchief on the ground. If it comes up with any trace of dust, you will be beaten. So you sweep with a desperate, focused intensity. You learn the way the wind blows through the courtyards, where the dust likes to settle. You become an expert in the geography of grime. This seemingly mundane, endless labor was the historical reality for most junior eunuchs. The grandeur of the palace was built on the back-breaking, invisible work of thousands of servants. While the high-ranking eunuchs engaged in court politics, the vast majority were effectively janitors, kitchen hands, and laborers. Their lives were a monotonous cycle of physical work, designed to keep them too busy and too tired to cause trouble. Now for a specific, and surprisingly beautiful, detail related to this menial task. One of the most important sweeping duties took place in the winter. After a snowfall, the courtyards and walkways had to be cleared immediately so that the imperial family could move about without slipping. But you did not simply shovel the snow away. That would be too crude. You were taught to sweep the snow into neat, artistic drifts along the sides of the walkways, creating elegant, curving lines that complemented the architecture of the palace. You were expected to turn a practical task into an aesthetic one. In the quiet, frozen air of a winter morning, the palace would be filled with the soft, rhythmic shush-shush-shush of hundreds of bamboo brooms on snow. For a brief moment, you were not just a lowly servant. You were an artist, painting with snow. It was a fleeting moment of beauty in an otherwise grim existence. This raises an interesting point of debate for social historians. What was the psychological impact of this kind of labor? On one hand, it was clearly a tool of oppression. The monotony, the physical exhaustion, the constant threat of punishment for a speck of dust. It was all designed to break a new eunuch's Spirit instill a sense of his own insignificance. It was a way of reinforcing the idea that he was a tool, a thing, valued only for his utility. On the other hand, some sociologists and psychologists might argue that there could be an unintended, positive side effect. The rhythmic, repetitive nature of the work could be meditative. In a life filled with constant fear and anxiety, the simple, predictable task of sweeping could provide a strange sort of mental refuge. It was a job where the rules were clear and the goal was achievable. By focusing entirely on the physical task, you could quiet the noisy, fearful parts of your brain. Could this menial labor, intended to be dehumanizing, have accidentally become a coping mechanism, a way to find a small pocket of peace and order in a chaotic world? The debate is whether this work ultimately destroyed the spirit or, paradoxically, provided the structure needed to preserve it. You stand in the middle of a vast, empty courtyard. The sun is setting, painting the high, curved roofs of the palace in shades of orange gold. Your back aches, your hands are raw from gripping the bamboo pole, and your tunic is soaked with sweat. You have been sweeping for 12 hours. You look back at your work. The immense expanse of stone is immaculate. A perfect, clean slate. For a moment, you feel a tiny, forbidden flicker of pride. You had imposed order on this small corner of the world. But then a procession for a high-ranking consort sweeps through, their silk slippers and the feet of their attendants immediately undoing your day's work. You bow your head low, waiting for them to pass. You do not watch them. You watch the dust they kick up settle back onto your perfectly clean stones. You pick up your broom. The work is never done. After years of sweeping courtyards and performing other menial tasks, your master decides you are ready. Through his recommendation, you are given a new assignment, one that brings you a terrifying step closer to the heart of power. You are assigned to be a personal attendant to one of the lower-ranking imperial consorts. This is your chance to prove your worth, but it is also a chance to fail spectacularly. The consort you serve is a young woman, perhaps only a few years older than you. She lives in a secluded, elegant courtyard in the rear precincts of the Forbidden City. Her life is one of quiet luxury and intense boredom. Her days punctuated by the distant hope that the Emperor might summon her. Your job is to be her shadow, her hands, and the silent fulfiller of her every need. The art of serving a master, a shadowy, is infinitely more complex than sweeping floors. It is a science of anticipation. You must learn your consort's habits, her moods, her preferences. Does she like her tea brewed for 1 minute or 2? Does she prefer the window open or closed? Which hairpin does she favor on a sunny day? You must know these things without ever being told. Your day is a constant, silent ballet of service. You are there when she wakes, holding a warm, damp cloth for her face. You help her choose her robes for the day, laying out the silks without a word. You stand for hours, motionless, in the corner of her chamber while she practices calligraphy or plays a zither, ready to refill her inkstone or fetch her a new sheet of paper at a moment's notice. Your own needs, for food, for rest, for a moment of quiet, are completely irrelevant. This absolute, almost telepathic, level of service is a well-documented historical reality of the palace. The comfort and whims of the imperial family were paramount. A successful servant was one who could make his master's life flow seamlessly, without any friction or effort on their part. To force a consort to have to ask for something was considered a minor failure of your duties. Now for a specific, and deeply stressful, detail of this service, the ritual of the meal. When your consort's food arrives from the imperial kitchens, it is not simply placed before her. It is an elaborate ceremony, and you are a key player. The dishes, often dozens of them for a single person, are brought in by a line of junior eunuchs. You are the one who takes the silver chopsticks and, under the watchful eye of your master and the consort, you take a tiny portion from each and every dish and place it in your own mouth. This is called shidu, testing for poison. You are the official food taster. After you have tasted everything and a few moments have passed to ensure you do not drop dead or start convulsing, you then use a fresh pair of chopsticks to serve the consort her chosen dishes. Every meal is a small game of Russian roulette. While deliberate poisoning of a consort's main meal was rare, the possibility was always there. A constant, low-level threat that you had to face 3 times a day. This practice brings us to a compelling historical debate. What was the true nature of the relationship between a eunuch and the consort he served? The traditional Confucian view, held by the male officials outside the palace, was that this was a dangerous and corrupting intimacy. They feared that eunuchs, spending all their time in the women's quarters, would become feminized and would conspire with the consorts to manipulate the emperor, meddling in politics and disrupting the proper order of the state. They saw the inner court as a hotbed of intrigue, with the eunuchs and the ladies as the primary agents of chaos. However, more recent scholarship, particularly from a social history perspective, suggests a more complex and sometimes more humane picture. In the isolated, lonely world of the women's quarters, a eunuch and his mistress could sometimes form a genuine bond of friendship and codependency. You were her only link to the outside world, her only confidant. You knew her secrets, her fears, her ambitions. She, in turn, was the source of your livelihood and your protection. A loyal eunuch would go to great lengths to advance his mistress's standing, as her success was his success. This could be a relationship of mutual trust and even affection, a small island of humanity in a sea of rigid protocol. The debate is whether these relationships were primarily political alliances of convenience or if they could, and often did, blossom into something akin to genuine friendship. Your consort is in a bad mood today. The emperor did not choose her nameplate last night, which means he will not be visiting. She has thrown a porcelain teacup against the wall, and it has shattered. Your job is to clean it up. You do so silently and efficiently, your bare hands carefully picking up the sharp pieces. She watches you, her eyes filled with a mixture of frustration and despair. You are the only one she can show her anger to, because you are safe. You are not a rival. You are not a man. You are a eunuch. You are just a part of the furniture. You finish cleaning, bow, and retreat to your corner, resuming your pose as a motionless, silent statue, waiting for her next unspoken command. The palace operates on a 24-hour cycle, and your duties do not end when the sun goes down. One of the most dreaded and important jobs for a junior eunuch is night duty. You are assigned to stand guard, alone, in a specific part of the palace, perhaps outside the chambers of your consort, in a long, dark corridor, or at the entrance to a deserted audience hall. The silence of the Forbidden City at night is a profound and unnerving thing. During the day, it is a bustling place, full of the sounds of life. But at night, a deep, heavy quiet descends, broken only by the distant cry of a bird or the soft sigh of the wind. The vast, empty courtyards, bathed in the cold, white light of the moon, feel like the landscapes of another planet. The familiar buildings loom like giant, sleeping beasts. Your job is to be a living sentinel. You stand for hours on end, motionless, every sense on high alert. You are listening for any unusual sound. A footstep that should not be there. A whispered conversation. The scrape of a door being opened. You are watching for any flicker of light. Any shadow that moves. You are the eyes and ears of the palace while it sleeps. This nocturnal vigilance was a critical part of palace security. It was a defense against assassins, thieves, and, most importantly, against illicit affairs. The absolute separation of men and women in the palace was paramount, and the night watch eunuchs were the primary enforcers of this rule. Any man found in the inner quarters at night would be put to death without question. Now, for a specific and deeply ingrained cultural detail of your nightly vigil, the fear of ghosts, the palace, a place of so much intrigue, betrayal, and untimely death, was believed to be intensely haunted. Every eunuch had a story. They told tales of the ghost of a spurned consort wailing in a locked courtyard, or the spectral form of a murdered official gliding down a dark passageway. As you stand your post in the dead of night, every creak of a floorboard, every rustle of the wind in the trees, becomes a potential sign of the supernatural. The fear of a living intruder is matched, and sometimes surpassed, by the fear of the dead. Your vigil is not just against assassins. It is against the restless spirits of the palace's bloody history. This deep-seated belief in ghosts added a thick layer of psychological terror to an already stressful job. This brings us to a fascinating debate among historians and psychologists about the mental health of palace eunuchs. What was the long-term psychological toll of living in such a high-stress, paranoid, and isolated environment? The traditional historical view often portrays powerful eunuchs as monstrous and corrupt, their personalities warped by their physical mutilation and their quest for power. This perspective sees them as inherently unbalanced and psychologically damaged. However, a more modern and compassionate view suggests that we should see them through the lens of trauma and institutionalization. From this perspective, the madness of some eunuchs was not an inherent trait, but a predictable outcome of their life experience. They suffered a profound trauma in childhood, were raised in an environment of constant fear and political intrigue, were deprived of normal family life, and were often sleep-deprived from duties like the night watch. The paranoia, the cruelty, and the obsessive behavior seen in some high-ranking eunuchs could be interpreted as symptoms of complex post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. The debate is whether we should view the notorious, evil eunuchs of history as villains who chose to be monstrous, or as tragic victims whose personalities were systematically destroyed by the institution they served. Tonight, you are on duty in the long gallery, a seemingly endless corridor painted with intricate landscapes. The only light comes from the moon filtering through the latticed windows, casting eerie, shifting patterns on the floor. It is 3 a.m. Your feet ache from standing. Your eyes burn from staring into the darkness. You are fighting off a wave of exhaustion, the kind that makes your mind play tricks on you. Did you just hear a whisper at the far end of the hall? Was that a shadow that just moved near that pillar? You grip the wooden clapper you carry, a tool used to sound the hour and to signal an alarm, and your heart pounds in the echoing silence. The fear is a physical thing, a cold presence that stands beside you in the dark. You are alone, but you feel as if you are being watched by 1,000 unseen eyes, both living and dead, and you must stand here, in this state of heightened terror, until the first light of dawn. You are not entirely alone in this gilded cage. You are surrounded by hundreds, even thousands, of other eunuchs. They are your colleagues, your roommates, and the only people in the world who truly understand the unique strangeness of your life. but your relationship with them is a complicated dance of camaraderie and competition. Your fellow junior eunuchs are your closest companions. You huddle together for warmth in the drafty dormitories at night. You share stories, whispered jokes, and precious, stolen snacks. You complain about your masters, your aching feet, and your fear of ghosts. There is a genuine bond here, a brotherhood forged in shared misery. When a new boy arrives, fresh from the knife RS room and trembling with fear, you show him a small kindness, remembering your own first terrifying days. This is your support system, your surrogate family. This sense of a shared corporate identity is a well-documented aspect of eunuch communities in various cultures. They often develop their own slang, their own internal hierarchies, and a fierce loyalty to their group, especially when dealing with the outsiders of the court, like the scholar officials or the palace guards. They were a distinct social class, united by their unique physical state and their shared service to the throne. But as you get older and begin to climb the ladder, this simple camaraderie starts to fray. The palace is a zero-sum game. There are a limited number of desirable positions, a promotion to a wealthier department, an assignment to a favored consort, a place in the inner circle of a powerful head eunuch. Your friend from the sweeping crew is now your rival for that coveted spot. This is where the subtle art of palace politics begins. You learn to be careful about what you say, even to your closest friends. A casual complaint you make about your master could be strategically repeated to him by someone looking to curry favor. You might see a friend make a small mistake and face a choice. Do you cover for him, or do you quietly ensure a superior notices, thus removing a competitor? The system is designed to pit you against one another. Herein lies a specific, and rather sordid, detail of this internal competition. The control of petty cash and perquisites, even at a low level. There were opportunities for minor graft. Perhaps you are in charge of distributing candles for the lanterns. You might give a slightly longer candle to a friend, or lose a few to sell outside the palace for a tiny profit. The eunuch in charge of the consort's leftover food, which was often vast and luxurious, had significant power. He could distribute the best leftovers to his allies or sell them. This created a complex black market economy within the palace walls, where favors were rated, alliances were sealed, and rivalries were played out over things as small as a chicken wing or a silk ribbon. Control over these small streams of resources was the first step on the ladder to real power. This internal dynamic has led to a historical debate about the structure of eunuch society. Was it, at its core, a unified and cohesive third gender or social class, defined by its collective interests against the rest of the court? This view emphasizes the solidarity, the shared identity, and the ways in which eunuchs acted as a unified bloc to protect their power and privileges, especially when a weak emperor was on the throne. The opposing argument is that the eunuch community was perpetually fractured and consumed by vicious infighting. This view suggests that any sense of unity was superficial. In reality, they were divided into countless competing factions, often aligned with different consorts, princes, or external political figures. The backstabbing, betrayals, and even assassinations within the eunuch ranks were, in this view, more common and more destructive than their conflicts with outside officials. The debate is whether their story is one of a marginalized group finding strength in unity, or of a group that, due to the pressures of their environment, ultimately turned on itself. One of your old friends, Wei, has just been promoted. He is now a junior assistant to one of the head eunuchs in the Department of Ceremonies. You are happy for him, but you also feel a sharp, bitter pang of jealousy. Last week, you had the opportunity to report a minor error he made, but you chose to keep silent. Now, you watch as he walks past in his new, slightly more ornate robes. He gives you a brief, almost pitying nod. The distance between you has already grown. You are still a personal attendant, while he is on a path to real influence. You congratulate him, your voice perfectly pitched to show no trace of envy. He thanks you, his voice equally controlled. You are both playing the game. You are still friends, for now, but you both know that in the Forbidden City, the only person you can ever truly, completely trust is yourself, and even that is not always a safe bet. Life in the palace is a relentless grind of work, rules, and fear. There is very little room for joy or relaxation. But even in the most oppressive environments, humans find ways to entertain themselves. For you and your fellow eunuchs, entertainment is a rare, often forbidden, and intensely cherished commodity. Most of your leisure time is not truly your own. It might be spent gambling, in the cramped dormitories at night, after the senior eunuchs have retired. You might pull out a set of dominoes or dice. You do not play for money, which you do not have. You play for things that matter. A portion of your next day's rice ration, a promise to cover a small part of a friend's duties, or a piece of fruit saved from a consort's meal. The stakes are small, but the thrill is real. It is a brief escape from the rigid order of your life, a small pocket of chaos that you can control. Of course, gambling is strictly forbidden. If you are caught, the punishment is a severe beating and the confiscation of your precious, makeshift stakes. This clandestine gambling is a historically documented pastime for many palace servants. It was a way to alleviate the crushing boredom and to create a social hierarchy based on luck and skill, rather than the official ranks of the palace. The best gambler, even if he was a lowly sweeper, could command a temporary respect from his peers. Another major form of entertainment was storytelling and palace gossip. At night, an older eunuch who was a gifted storyteller might hold an informal court, recounting epic tales of heroes and demons, or, more thrillingly, scandalous stories from the palace's past. You would listen, enthralled, to tales of the audacious schemes of a famous eunuch from a previous dynasty, or the tragic love affair of a long-dead princess. This was your history, your literature, and your soap opera, all rolled into one. It was a way of building a shared culture and understanding your place in the long, dramatic history of the palace. Now for a specific, and rather charming, little detail about a forbidden pleasure. Keeping pets. Officially, keeping personal pets was not allowed. They were considered messy and a potential distraction. But many eunuchs, starved for affection and a connection to a living thing that was not a demanding master, would secretly keep small animals. A cricket in a tiny, intricately carved gourd was a common and beloved pet. You would spend hours caring for it, feeding it tiny bits of food, and listening to its chirping song at night. Its song was a small, natural sound in a world of artificial silence and whispered intrigue. Some eunuchs even became famous for their prize-winning fighting crickets. These tiny creatures provided a focus for nurturing instincts that had no other outlet. They were a small, secret source of unconditional affection. This brings us to a historical debate about the emotional lives of eunuchs. Were they, as the traditional stereotype suggests, emotionally barren, incapable of love or deep feeling due to their physical state and their brutal upbringing? This view portrays them as driven only by greed and ambition. However, a more compassionate school of thought argues that this is a gross oversimplification. the desire for connection, for love, for something to care for. It is a fundamental human need. Eunuchs, denied the outlets of marriage and family, simply channeled these emotions in different directions. The fierce loyalty to a master, the protective bond with an apprentice, the secret affection for a pet cricket. These were not signs of a warped personality, but evidence of a deeply human, emotional life, adapting and surviving under extreme circumstances. Scholars who study letters and diaries written by some eunuchs find evidence of deep friendships, profound grief, and a rich inner world. The debate is whether we should see their emotional attachments as pathetic substitutes for real family, or as valid and deeply meaningful relationships in their own right. Tonight, you have a rare moment to yourself. You are hidden away in a small, unused storage room. In your hands, you hold a small clay pot. Inside is your most treasured secret, a small, green praying mantis you found in the Imperial garden. You feed it a fly you managed to catch. You watch as it meticulously cleans its long, elegant legs. It is a perfect, tiny creature, fierce and beautiful. It does not know it is in a palace. It does not know the rules. It is simply, uncomplicatedly alive. For these few precious moments, watching your secret pet, you are not New Kai, your slave. You are just a person, finding a flicker of simple, quiet joy in a world that is designed to have none. You carefully hide the pot again before you have to return to your duties. This small, forbidden life is what keeps you sane. For years, your life has been a flat line of monotonous, invisible labor. You have swept the courtyards. You have tested for poison. You have stood silent guard in dark corridors. You have done your work perfectly, attracting no negative attention, but no positive attention either. In the Forbidden City, invisibility is safety, but it is also a dead end. Your only hope for a better life is to be noticed, for the right reason, at the right time. One sweltering summer afternoon, the Emperor, accompanied by a small retinue, decides to take an impromptu stroll through the part of the gardens where you are assigned to trim the hedges. This is a rare and terrifying event. The protocol is clear. You are to make yourself as small as possible, to press yourself against a wall or hide behind a tree, and to keep your eyes fixed on the ground as the imperial procession passes. A sudden gust of wind whips through the garden. It catches the emperor's favorite silk fan, a priceless work of art, and sends it fluttering away. It lands in the middle of a large, murky ornamental pond, far from the edge. The emperor lets out a cry of frustration. His attendants, a group of high-ranking eunuchs, freeze in a panic. The pond is deep and filled with slimy algae. No one wants to ruin their exquisite silk robes or, worse, displease the emperor by failing to retrieve the fan properly. They stand there, dithering, unsure of what to do. This is your moment. It is a terrifying gamble. To act without being ordered is a breach of protocol, but to do nothing is to let the opportunity vanish. While the senior eunuchs are still debating, you make your move. You slip out from behind the hedge, take off your cloth shoes, and wade into the filthy, stagnant water without a moment's hesitation. The water is cold and slimy, and the mud sucks at your ankles. You reach the fan, lift it carefully from the water, and hold it high above your head to prevent it from dripping. You wade back, your simple tunic now soaked and stained. You approach the imperial party, avert your eyes, get down on your knees, and hold the fan up with both hands. This small act of quick-witted, decisive action is the kind of break that could change a eunuch's life. While the grand narratives of history focus on major political schemes, The reality of palace life was that fortunes were often built on such small, pivotal moments. It was about demonstrating a specific kind of intelligence, not literary or strategic genius, but a practical, proactive loyalty that put the master's smallest whim above one's own comfort and safety. Now for a specific detail that makes your action even more impressive. You know that simply returning a wet fan is not enough. As you kneel, you do not look at the emperor. You look at the head eunuch and say, in a clear but humble voice, "This slave was foolish and has soiled the path. I beg permission to fetch a warm, dry cloth to clean the Son of Heaven's hands, as the dampness of the pond might be unhealthy." In this single sentence, you have done three things. You have taken the blame for the mess. You have shown concern for the emperor's well-being. And you have subtly pointed out the incompetence of the senior eunuchs without ever accusing them. It is a masterstroke of palace communication. This incident brings up a historical debate about the nature of power for eunuchs. Was their power primarily borrowed from the emperor, making them mere reflections of his authority? Or could they develop their own, independent power base? The traditional view holds that eunuchs were entirely dependent on the emperor's favor. When the emperor was strong, they were pliant servants. When he was weak, they became monstrous parasites, usurping his power. Their influence was never truly their own. A more modern interpretation, however, argues that skilled eunuchs were masters of bureaucratic and social power. They understood the intricate machinery of the court better than anyone. They could build networks of patronage, control information flow, and form alliances with factions both inside and outside the palace. While their power ultimately originated from the throne, they could become so deeply embedded in the state's operation that they were indispensable. Their power was not just borrowed, it was earned through a unique combination of servitude, intelligence, and ruthlessness. The debate is whether they were merely stewards of imperial power or if they became a distinct and independent political force in their own right. The emperor is pleased. He is impressed by your quick thinking and your lack of hesitation. He barely glances at you, but he says to the head eunuch, "This one is clever. Do not let him waste his time pulling weeds." That is it. That is all it takes. The imperial procession moves on. You are left kneeling on the path, soaked in filthy pond water, your heart hammering in your chest. The other eunuchs are looking at you now, their expressions a mixture of envy and newfound respect. You have stepped out of the shadows. You have been noticed. Your life will never be the same. You have taken your first perilous step up the long, slippery ladder of the Forbidden City. The emperor's casual remark is as good as a royal decree. Within days, you are transferred from the manual labor of the gardens to a position of trust and responsibility. You are made a junior clerk in the department of the palace treasury, the very place that holds your bow in its records. This is a seismic shift in your status. You are no longer dealing with brooms and dirt. You are now dealing with silk, porcelain, and ledgers. Your new workplace is a series of vast, well-guarded storehouses. The air here smells not of dust and sweat, but of aged wood, fragrant camphor, and beeswax. The shelves are piled high with bolts of the finest silk, chests of precious furs, crates of exquisite porcelain, and boxes of rare teas. This is the material wealth of the empire, and you are now one of its custodians. Your job is to learn the inventory. Under the tutelage of a senior treasury eunuch, you spend your days counting, recording, and inspecting. You learn the difference between 27 different types of blue and white porcelain. You learn to identify the quality of a silk bolt just by the feel of it. You learn the complex system of ledgers and seals used to track every single item that enters or leaves the storerooms. It is meticulous, demanding work, and a single mistake in your accounting could be seen as a sign of incompetence or, worse, theft. This control over the palace supplies was a classic route to power for eunuchs. The treasury was one of the most important departments, and the eunuchs who ran it had their hands on the literal purse strings of the court. They controlled the flow of luxury goods that were used as gifts, bribes, and rewards. To be a treasury eunuch was to be in a position of immense potential influence. Now for the specific and morally ambiguous detail of this new job. The perks. This is what the other eunuchs call a fei chai, a fed post, because of the opportunities for personal enrichment. The system was rife with loopholes. For example, a bolt of silk is supposed to measure a certain length. Over time, you might learn to skillfully trim a tiny, almost imperceptible sliver from each bolt you handle. That sliver is worthless on its own, but over thousands of bolts, it adds up to a new roll of silk that can be sold on the black market. Or perhaps a shipment of porcelain arrives. A few bowls are accidentally broken during transport, or so the ledger says. In reality, these broken bowls are in perfect condition and find their way into the hands of a collector outside the palace, with the profit shared among the eunuchs involved. This systemic, low-level corruption was an open secret, a form of unofficial salary for the eunuchs who work clever and careful enough not to get caught. This practice fuels a major historical debate. Were eunuchs a corrupting influence on the state? Or were they simply playing by the rules of a corrupt system? The traditional Confucian view, articulated by generations of scholar officials, paints eunuchs as a cancer on the state. They accuse them of being greedy, materialistic, and of embezzling vast sums of public money to fund their lavish lifestyles, thereby weakening the dynasty. The historical records are full of memorials to the throne denouncing eunuch corruption. However, a revisionist perspective complicates this picture. Some historians argue that the entire imperial system was built on a foundation of patronage and gift-giving that blurred the lines between public and private funds. The officials who condemned the eunuchs were often just as corrupt, using their own positions to enrich their families and allies. The eunuchs, having no families to support, often spent their wealth on things like Buddhist monasteries, public works, or on building networks of loyalty within the palace. In this view, their corruption was no better or worse than the corruption of the officials. It was just a different flavor. The debate is whether eunuchs were the cause of the system's corruption or merely one of its most visible and convenient scapegoats. You are now part of this system. You have learned how to round down a delivery of charcoal, creating a small surplus that you and your master can use to trade for favors. You have a small stash of coins hidden in the wall of your dormitory, more money than your father ever saw in his entire life. You are no longer hungry. You eat well, from the damaged shipments of high-quality rice. You wear finer clothes, but you live with a new kind of fear. Before, you feared a beating for being clumsy. Now, you fear the executioner's axe for being caught with your hand in the till. You have traded the simple misery of poverty for the complex anxiety of wealth. You are learning that in the Forbidden City, power and peril are two sides of the same coin. Years pass. You are no longer a junior clerk. Through a combination of meticulous work, careful political maneuvering, and the patronage of your powerful master, you have risen through the ranks. You are now a mid-level official within the palace bureaucracy, perhaps a deputy director of the Imperial Wardrobe. You have your own spacious, private quarters. You have junior eunuchs who serve you. You have influence, You have wealth, but you have a profound, gnawing emptiness. You have no family, no wife, no children, no one to carry on your name or to burn incense at your grave when you are gone. In the world outside the palace walls, a man's life is defined by his lineage. His greatest duty is to his ancestors, and his greatest hope is in his descendants. You are cut off from this fundamental human chain. You are a tree with no roots and no branches. This sense of being the end of the line, of having no one to remember you, is a deep psychological wound for many eunuchs. So, you decide to do something about it. You decide to adopt a son. This practice of eunuchs adopting children was a common and historically significant phenomenon, especially for those who achieved wealth and power. It was a way to simulate the family life they were denied and to address the deep-seated cultural need for an heir. You cannot adopt just any child. The most common practice was to adopt one of your own nephews, a son of one of the brothers you left behind in your village. You send a messenger back to your home village, a place you have not seen in decades. You are now the figure of legend there, the local boy who went to the palace and became a great man. Your family, whom you have been supporting with money sent home over the years, is eager to oblige. One of your brothers gives you his second or third son. This boy, your nephew, is brought to the capital. He takes on your surname. He will be raised as your child. Now for the strange, and often tragic, detail of this arrangement. This adopted son is not usually castrated. He is raised as a whole man. He will be your heir, the one who inherits your illegally gained fortune and manages your affairs outside the palace. But he will not live with you inside the forbidden city. You will set him up in a fine house in the capital. You will hire the best tutors for him. You will use your influence to secure him a minor official post when he comes of age. Your relationship with him is one of distance, conducted through brief, formal visits when you are allowed to leave the palace. You pour all your frustrated paternal instincts, your ambitions, and your hopes into this boy whom you barely see. He is your vanity project, your claim to a form of immortality. This practice has led to a significant historical debate about the motivations behind these adoptions. Was it primarily a sentimental act, a genuine attempt to soothe the emotional pain of childlessness? This view sees the adoptions as a deeply human response, an attempt to build a family and experience the joys of fatherhood, however vicariously. The letters and wills of some eunuchs show deep affection for their adopted sons, treating them with all the leavened concern of a biological father. However, a more cynical interpretation argues that these adoptions were primarily pragmatic and political. An adopted son was a crucial asset. He was your agent in the outside world, a world you could not freely move in. He could manage your properties, run your businesses, and bribe officials on your behalf. He was the public, legitimate face of your hidden empire. Furthermore, having a family, even an adopted one, gave a eunuch an air of normalcy and respectability. It made him seem less like a strange, isolated creature and more like a traditional Confucian patriarch. The debate is whether the adopted son was, at his core, a beloved child or a strategic investment. You sit in the reception hall of your elegant mansion outside the palace walls. It is one of your rare days of leave. Across from you sits your adopted son, a young man of 15. He is dressed in fine silks that you paid for. He respectfully recites a classic poem that his expensive tutor has taught him. He looks healthy and strong. He has your family's eyes. You feel a surge of pride, so fierce it is almost painful. This is your legacy. This is the proof that your sacrifice was not for nothing. But there is also a vast, unbridgeable gulf between you. He is a part of a world of sunlight, of women, of future children, that you can never enter. He calls you father, but his eyes are full of a polite, fearful distance. He is your son, but he is also a stranger. You are his provider, but you can never be his dad. The visit ends. You return to the sterile, all-male world of the palace. You are a father, but you are also, and always will be, profoundly alone. Your rise through the palace hierarchy has been slow and steady, built on a foundation of caution, competence, and carefully cultivated relationships. You have survived purges, outmaneuvered rivals, and attached yourself to the right patrons. Now, in the prime of your life, you achieve the position that every ambitious eunuch dreams of. You become one of the emperor's personal attendants. You are now a member of the most elite and powerful group of eunuchs in the empire. You no longer work in the storerooms or the outer offices. Your domain is the emperor's private chambers, the very heart of the Forbidden City. You are one of perhaps a dozen eunuchs who have the right to be in the emperor's presence at any time, day or night. You are what they call a QNXIN, a trusted confidant. Your new role is one of absolute, intimate service. You are the first person the emperor sees when he wakes up and the last person he sees before he sleeps. You help him dress in his ceremonial dragon robes, a process that can take hours and involves multiple layers of silk. You stand by his side during meals, serving him his food and wine. You hold the inkstone while he practices calligraphy. You read to him from memorials and classics when his eyes are tired. You are closer to him than his empress, his consorts, his own children. This proximity to the emperor is the ultimate source of eunuch power, a defining historical feature of many imperial courts. Because you control access to the emperor, the son of heaven, you control the flow of information. An official who wants to present a memorial to the throne must go through you. A prince who seeks an audience with his father must get your approval. You become the gatekeeper. Your ability to schedule an appointment, to lose a document, or to whisper a word of praise or poison into the emperor's ear at the right moment gives you a degree of influence that is completely disproportionate to your official rank. Now, for a specific and deeply personal detail of this relationship, you become the emperor's living diary. He is a man who lives a life of profound isolation, surrounded by sycophants and people who want something from him. He is a god, but he is also a prisoner of his own divinity. You are the one person to whom he can sometimes show a flicker of his true self. He might complain to you about a nagging minister. He might share his worries about a drought in a distant province. He might even make a joke. You are his sounding board, his confidant, the safe repository for the thoughts and feelings he can show no one else. You learn to be the perfect listener, attentive, empathetic, but offering no opinions of your own unless explicitly asked. Your silence is as important as your service. This unique, intimate relationship between emperors and their eunuch attendants has sparked a major historical debate. Why did so many powerful rulers, from the Chinese son of heaven to the Roman emperors and Ottoman sultans, place so much trust in castrated servants? The traditional argument, often made by the eunuch's rivals, is that it was a sign of a weak or decadent ruler. A strong, virtuous emperor would rely on his properly educated scholar officials, not on these mutilated, uncultured servants. This view sees the rise of eunuch power as a symptom of dynastic decline. A more functionalist argument, however, contends that it was a perfectly rational political choice. Eunuchs had one overwhelming advantage. They could not found their own dynasties. They had no sons, no family, to whom they could pass on power. Their loyalty, in theory, was entirely to the emperor himself, not to a clan or a lineage. An official, no matter how loyal, always had his family's interests at heart. A eunuch's only interest was the emperor's interest, because his own power and survival were completely dependent on the emperor's. This made them, in many ways, the most trustworthy servants a paranoid ruler could have. The debate is whether reliance on eunuchs was a political pathology or a shrewd political strategy. Tonight, the emperor is in a melancholic mood. He has dismissed his consorts and is sitting alone by a window, looking up at the moon. You are the only other person in the room, standing silently in the corner. After a long silence, he speaks, his voice barely a whisper. "Do you think my father is watching?" he asks. "Do you think he is proud of what I have done?" You do not answer. You simply move forward, pour him a fresh cup of warm wine, and place it gently by his hand. He takes it without looking at you. He does not need an answer. He just needs another human being to be present in his crushing solitude. In this moment, you are not a servant. You are not a politician. You are the sole witness to the loneliness of a god. And that is the secret of your power. Your position as the emperor's confidant places you at the apex of the palace's internal hierarchy, but it also thrusts you into a new and far more dangerous arena. The silent, bitter war between the inner court, the eunuchs, and the outer court, the scholar officials. The men of the outer court are the official, legitimate government of the empire. They are the ministers, the grand secretaries, the provincial governors. They are a class of highly educated men who have spent their lives studying the Confucian classics and have risen through the grueling civil service examination system. They see themselves as the moral and intellectual guardians of the dynasty, and they despise you. To them, you are everything that is wrong with the world. You are uneducated, a lowly servant who has risen to power not through merit but through flattery and servitude. You are a morning glory vine, a parasite that has wrapped itself around the imperial dragon tree, sucking its strength and blocking the light from reaching the virtuous officials below. Their historical records and private letters are filled with venomous denunciations of you and your kind. Your interactions with these powerful ministers are a masterclass in passive aggression. When a grand minister, a man who could command armies and govern millions, comes for an audience with the emperor, he must first pass by you. He will greet you with a formal, correct politeness that is colder than ice. He will not acknowledge your power directly, but it hangs in the air between you. You, in turn, will treat him with an exaggerated, almost mocking, humility. You will bow lower than necessary, call him great lord in a tone that is just a little too smooth. It is a duel fought with etiquette, a battle of veiled insults and subtle provocations. This rivalry between the eunuchs and the scholar bureaucracy is a central theme running through much of Chinese imperial history. It was an institutionalized conflict between two competing elites. The officials' power was based on their moral authority, their classical education, and their control of the formal state bureaucracy. The eunuchs' power was based on their personal proximity to the emperor, their control of the palace's internal mechanisms, and their command of the secret police or imperial guard. Now for a specific and insidious tactic in this shadow war. One of your most powerful weapons is the control of information. When a minister submits a written memorial to the emperor, it passes through your hands first. You might accidentally place it at the bottom of a large pile of documents, ensuring the emperor doesn't see it for weeks. Or, more subtly, when you present it to the emperor, you might summarize it for him. In your summary, You can strategically misrepresent the minister's tone, making him sound more arrogant or more demanding than he intended. You might say, Great Lord Chen seems very insistent on this matter, planting a small seed of irritation in the emperor's mind before he even reads the first word. It is a quiet, devastating form of character assassination. This leads to a major historical debate about the causes of this conflict. Was it, as the officials claimed, a righteous struggle between good government and corrupt, usurping servants? This traditional narrative portrays the scholar officials as the heroes of the story, constantly fighting to save the emperor and the dynasty from the malevolent influence of the eunuchs. However, a more critical perspective argues that the conflict was, at its heart, a simple power struggle between two sets of elites, with the emperor cleverly playing one off against the other to maintain his own absolute authority. From this viewpoint, the high-minded, moralistic rhetoric of the officials was often a cover for their own political ambitions and their frustration at being blocked from total control. The eunuchs, in turn, were not necessarily trying to destroy the state. They were trying to protect their own position within it. Some historians even argue that the eunuchs, with their undivided loyalty to the throne, sometimes acted as a necessary check on the power of the great official families, who might have their own dynastic ambitions. The debate is whether this was a battle for the soul of the empire or just a particularly nasty turf war. A powerful minister, the head of the board of war, is waiting for his audience. He needs the emperor's seal on an urgent military matter. You have made him wait for an hour, telling him the emperor is indisposed. In reality, the emperor is simply admiring his collection of crickets. You are making the minister wait as a small reminder of who truly controls the schedule of the Son of Heaven. When you finally grant him entry, he gives you a look of pure, cold hatred. You respond with a serene, beatific smile. In his eyes, you are a monstrous aberration. In your own, you are a loyal watchdog, protecting your master from the endless demands of his arrogant servants. The line between the two is thinner than a sheet of rice paper. You are no longer just a servant, not even just a confidant. You have become a power unto yourself. Leveraging your proximity to the emperor and the wealth you have discreetly accumulated, you begin to build your own empire within the empire. It is an invisible network of patronage, loyalty, and fear that extends from the deepest corners of the palace to the farthest provinces. Your first step is to consolidate your power base within the eunuch community. You are now a Taijian, a grand eunuch, and you have hundreds, if not thousands, of lower-ranking eunuchs looking to you for guidance and protection. You carefully promote those who have shown you absolute loyalty, and you skillfully sideline or remove those who have not. You place your protégés in key positions: the treasury, the Imperial Guard, the department that handles official appointments. You create a network where every important piece of information, every significant decision, flows through someone who owes their career to you. This creation of a powerful eunuch bureaucracy, sometimes called the Eastern Depot or Western Depot in the Ming Dynasty, is a recurring historical phenomenon. When a eunuch gained the supreme trust of the emperor, he could effectively create a parallel government, one that was often more efficient and more ruthless than the official state bureaucracy because it answered only to him and his master. Your influence now extends beyond the palace walls. A provincial magistrate needs a promotion. He cannot get the attention of the grand ministers in the capital, so he sends a gift to your adopted son, who then passes the request on to you. If the gift is substantial enough, you might find a moment to mention to the emperor that you have heard good things about a certain magistrate in a certain province. A week later, that magistrate has a new, more prestigious posting. He now owes his career to you, and he will be your man in that province, feeding you information and carrying out your wishes. Now for a specific and terrifying detail of your new power: the control of the secret police. Emperors, ever paranoid about plots and dissent, often entrusted their personal intelligence gathering and internal security forces to their most trusted eunuchs. You might be appointed the head of this shadowy organization. You now have the power to arrest, interrogate, and disappear anyone you deem a threat to the throne, which, conveniently, often includes your political enemies. You have a legion of spies and thugs at your command. The minister who looked at you with such contempt a few years ago now bows when you enter a room. His eyes filled not with hatred, though with fear. This accumulation of vast, extra-legal power in the hands of a single eunuch is the focus of intense historical debate. The traditional narrative, written by their enemies, portrays these eunuch dictators, like Wei Zhongxian in the Ming Dynasty, as monstrous tyrants. The histories paint them as cartoonishly evil, indulging in orgies of violence, corruption, and personal aggrandizement, ultimately bringing the dynasty to its knees. They are the ultimate cautionary tale of what happens when the natural order is subverted. However, a more nuanced historical analysis, while not excusing their brutality, attempts to understand their actions within a political context. Some historians argue that these powerful eunuchs were not acting out of pure, chaotic evil, but were often carrying out the emperor's unstated will. The emperor himself could not be seen ordering the torture of a respected scholar official, but his favorite eunuch could. The eunuch became the emperor's black glove, doing the dirty work that was necessary to maintain absolute power. In this view, they were not usurping the emperor's authority, but acting as its most extreme and terrifying extension. The debate is whether these eunuch strongmen were rogue agents who hijacked the state, or loyal servants who were simply following the implicit orders of a paranoid master. You sit in your private office, a quiet, elegant room decorated with priceless art. On your desk is a series of reports. One details the grain shipments from the south. Another lists the latest movements of a troublesome general on the northern frontier. A third is a transcript of an interrogation of a scholar who was caught writing a satirical poem about you. You issue a series of quiet commands. You divert a portion of the grain shipment to be sold, the profits going to a fund you control. You draft a note to the emperor suggesting the general be promoted to a desk job in the capital where you can watch him. You draw a simple circle on the interrogation transcript, a silent order for the scholar to be executed. You have no official title that grants you this authority, but you have the trust of the emperor, a network of loyal agents, and a complete lack of scruples. You are the most powerful man in the empire. You are also its most feared. Your small, invisible empire is now complete. You live in a world of unimaginable material luxury. The robes you wear are woven from the finest silk, so light they feel like a cloud on your skin. The food you eat is a daily banquet, a parade of exotic delicacies prepared by the best chefs in the empire. You have amassed a personal fortune that could buy and sell the estates of a dozen noblemen. But this life of opulence is built upon a crumbling foundation: your own failing health. As you age, the long-term consequences of your castration and your unnatural palace life begin to manifest in a host of unique health problems. The hormonal changes have had a profound effect on your body. You may have noticed that you never developed a deep voice or a beard, and that you have less muscle mass than other men. As you get older, you are at a much higher risk for osteoporosis. Your bones become brittle and fragile, A simple fall that a normal man would shake off could result in a shattered hip for you. This physiological reality is a key historical aspect of eunuch life. Modern endocrinology helps us understand what they only knew from observation. The lack of testosterone had severe, lifelong health consequences. They were prone to obesity, particularly around the abdomen and hips, and were at a higher risk for heart disease and diabetes. But the most immediate and troublesome health issue is related to your diet. The food you eat is a paradox of pleasure and pain. You are served rich, fatty meats, delicate pastries, and sweet, sticky rice cakes. This diet, combined with a more sedentary lifestyle as you rise in rank, leads to weight gain. However, the most significant problem is urinary. You have suffered from some level of incontinence your whole life, a legacy of the knife R.S. work. This condition is often exacerbated by age. Here is a specific, and rather unpleasant, dietary rule you must now follow. Doctors and folk wisdom of the time correctly link certain foods to urinary problems. You are advised to avoid spicy and salty foods, as they are believed to inflame the passages and make your incontinence worse. You must also be careful with your fluid intake, especially in the evening. You might love the taste of a fine wine or a fragrant tea, but you know that indulging too much will mean a difficult, messy night. So, in the midst of a grand banquet, surrounded by the most delicious food imaginable, you must exercise a rigid, medicinal self-control. You pick at the bland-ass dishes. You sip water instead of wine. Your luxurious diet is a minefield of potential humiliations. This unique set of health problems has led to a debate among medical historians about the quality of healthcare available to eunuchs. On one hand, as powerful and wealthy figures, they had access to the very best physicians in the empire. These doctors would have been experts in the specific ailments that plagued the eunuch community. They developed specialized herbal remedies and dietary regimens aimed at mitigating the worst symptoms. In this sense, eunuchs may have received a higher level of specialized medical attention than anyone else except the emperor himself. On the other hand, the fundamental understanding of medicine at the time was deeply flawed. Without knowledge of hormones, endocrinology, or modern surgery, the treatments offered were purely symptomatic. They could soothe a symptom, but they could not cure the underlying condition. The physicians could advise you not to eat salt, but they could not fix your damaged urinary tract or strengthen your brittle bones. The debate is whether the specialized care they received was a genuine benefit, or if it was just a gilded cage of palliative care that could never address the root causes of their suffering, which were inflicted by the knife in their youth. You are at a grand banquet celebrating the emperor's birthday. The hall is a kaleidoscope of color and sound. The tables are groaning under the weight of 100 different dishes. The air is thick with the smell of roasted duck, fragrant spices, and warm wine. You are seated at a place of high honor, but your own bowl contains only a small portion of plain, steamed rice and some bland, boiled vegetables. You watch as a junior official, trying to curry you favor, offers you a slice of succulent, crispy skinned pork. You smile, thank him, and politely decline, murmuring something about a delicate constitution. He doesn't understand. He sees your power, your silk robes, your serene expression. He doesn't see the thick padding of cotton you wear beneath those robes. He doesn't know about the constant, low-level pain, or the gnawing anxiety about losing control. You are a king in all but name, but you are a prisoner of your own fragile, failing body. Your power and wealth have allowed you to acquire the ultimate status symbol for a man of your position. a magnificent mansion outside the palace walls. It is your day, your private residence. It is a sprawling complex of courtyards, gardens, and exquisitely decorated halls. A miniature forbidden city that reflects your status as a grand eunuch. During your rare days of leave, you retreat to this personal kingdom. Here, you are the master. The servants bow to you not because you are a palace official, but because you are their employer. Your adopted son lives here, managing the estate in your name. The mansion is filled with priceless treasures you have acquired over the years. Ancient bronzes, luminous jade carvings, and paintings by famous masters. The gardens are a masterpiece of landscape art, with artfully arranged rocks, a serene lotus pond, and pavilions for quiet contemplation. It is a world of perfect, turreted beauty. This practice of high-ranking eunuchs building lavish private mansions is a well-documented historical fact. These estates became the centers of their power outside the palace, places where they could entertain allies, store their wealth, and manage their vast networks of influence. They were monuments to their success, a tangible proclamation that they were far more than mere servants. But as you walk through the silent, perfectly polished corridors of your home, a profound and hollow emptiness echoes in your heart. The house is beautiful, but it is not a home. It is a museum. It is a stage set for a life that you cannot truly live. Here is a specific and deeply poignant detail of your domestic life. In one of the main halls, you have a formal portrait of your ancestors, commissioned at great expense. Below it, there is an altar where your adopted son is supposed to burn incense and pay respects. This is the very picture of a traditional, respectable Confucian household, but it is a facade. The ancestors are not truly yours in a direct line, and the son is not truly your son. The entire setup is a carefully constructed imitation of a family, a performance of normalcy. That night, when the servants have retired and your son is in his own quarters, the great house is silent. There is no sound of a wife's gentle breathing beside you, no laughter of children playing in the courtyards. There is only the lonely sound of your own footsteps echoing in the vast, empty halls. This profound sense of loneliness and domestic emptiness has led to a debate among social historians about the personal lives of these powerful eunuchs. Did they manage to find genuine happiness and fulfillment in their wealth and power? Or were they, as their detractors claimed, miserable, pathetic figures rattling around in gilded cages? The traditional view leans towards the latter. It argues that no amount of silk or jade could compensate for the loss of a family and a normal human life. Their lavish lifestyles were a desperate, and ultimately failed, attempt to fill the void inside them. Their cruelty and ambition were the bitter fruits of their misery. However, a more revisionist interpretation suggests that we should not be so quick to judge their lives by our own standards of happiness. For a man who began life starving in a mud hut, a life of immense wealth, power, and security might have been a perfectly acceptable trade-off. Perhaps they found a different kind of fulfillment in the exercise of power, in the appreciation of art, in their devotion to the emperor, or in their patronage of Buddhism. This view cautions against romanticizing the family life they lost, reminding us that for many in that era, family was also a source of great burden and strife. The debate is whether we should see the life of a grand eunuch as a story of tragic emotional lack, or as a story of a different, but not necessarily lesser, form of human success. You stand in your garden by the lotus pond. The moon is reflected perfectly on the still, dark water. The air is fragrant with night-blooming jasmine. Everything is perfect. Everything is peaceful. and you have never felt more alone. The palace is a prison of rules and fear. This house is a prison of silence and memory. You own all of this, but none of it feels like it belongs to you. You are the master of a vast and beautiful emptiness. You have gained the whole world, but you have lost the one thing that might have made it feel like home. As a powerful man, you are surrounded by the trappings of safety. You have bodyguards, high walls, and the fear of the populace to protect you, that you harbor a secret, irrational terror of one of the most common and essential elements of life. Fire. This is not the normal, healthy respect that anyone has for a destructive force. It is a deep, primal, and all-consuming phobia. The sight of a flickering candle can make you uneasy. The roar of a large fire in a brazier can send a jolt of cold dread through you. You are obsessive about fire safety in your mansion and in your quarters at the palace, demanding that extra buckets of water be placed in every corridor and that all embers be extinguished with paranoid thoroughness. This intense pyrophobia was a strange and specific trait widely attributed to palace eunuchs, a historical curiosity noted in various anecdotal sources and records. It was a well-known quirk of your kind. While others might enjoy the warmth and light of a fire, you see it only as a source of existential threat. The reason for this fear is tied directly to the most important and most vulnerable object in your life, your bell, your treasure, the preserved proof of your castration stored in a jar within the palace treasury. Here is the specific, chilling detail that underpins your phobia. You believe, with absolute certainty, that you cannot be reincarnated as a whole man in the afterlife unless your bell is buried with your body. It is your ticket to a restored manhood in the next world, the greatest catastrophe that could possibly befall you. Therefore, is not death itself, but the destruction of this jar. And the single most likely way for that to happen is in a palace fire. The Forbidden City was a sprawling complex made largely of wood. Fires were a constant and terrifying threat. A lightning strike, a stray ember from a kitchen, an overturned lantern. Any of these could lead to a massive conflagration that could consume entire sections of the palace. Your deepest nightmare is that the treasury, the building that holds your key to the afterlife, will go up in flames. The thought of your bell being consumed by fire, of you being doomed to wander the spirit world as an incomplete, mutilated ghost for all eternity, is a horror beyond comprehension. It is a fate worse than 1,000 deaths. This has led to a fascinating historical debate about the religious and spiritual beliefs of eunuchs. Were they genuinely devout, or was their religious patronage a cynical tool for social acceptance and power? It is a complex question. On one hand, eunuchs were among the most lavish patrons of Buddhist and Taoist temples. They donated huge sums of money to build monasteries, to cast bronze statues, and to print scriptures. This could be seen as evidence of deep piety, a search for spiritual solace in a difficult life. Their unique position, outside the normal cycle of family and ancestor worship, may have drawn them to the more universalist and compassionate teachings of Buddhism. On the other hand, a more cynical interpretation argues that this patronage was purely transactional. They used their wealth to support religious institutions in exchange for prayers, social prestige, and, most importantly, a safe and respectable place to retire and be buried. The monasteries they endowed often had special wings or halls set aside for aging eunuchs. Furthermore, their religious practice often seemed focused on these worldly concerns, praying for the emperor's favor, for success against their rivals, or on the afterlife mechanics of ensuring a whole reincarnation. The debate is whether their faith was a profound spiritual quest or a pragmatic fire insurance policy for the soul. A fire alarm gong rings out in the distance. It is the sound you dread most. Panic, cold and immediate, seizes you. You rush out into the courtyard, your heart pounding. You see a plume of smoke rising from a distant part of the palace. Your first instinctive thought is not for the people who might be trapped, not for the priceless art that might be burning, but for the safety of the treasury. You shout for your attendants, your voice high and strained, demanding to know which section is on fire. You are a man who has faced down powerful ministers and ordered the deaths of your enemies without flinching. But the thought of a simple fire can reduce you to a state of trembling. Adjectero. Your power, your wealth, your influence, all of it is meaningless in the face of this one. All-consuming fear for your eternal soul. You have reached the pinnacle. You are the Grand Eunuch, the undisputed master of the inner court. The Emperor, now old and weary, relies on you for everything. You effectively run the day-to-day affairs of the empire. Ministers bow to you. Princes seek your favor. Your wealth is legendary. Your mansion is a palace in its own right. You have achieved a level of power that the hungry boy from the mud hut could never have dreamed of. You are at the summit of your life's ambition, and you are consumed by a gnawing, relentless anxiety. The view from the top is terrifying. You are no longer climbing. You are just trying not to fall. Every person who smiles at you, every official who offers you a gift, every junior eunuch who bows to you is a potential threat. Are they loyal, or are they waiting for a moment of weakness to strike? The paranoia that was once a survival tool has now become the permanent weather of your mind. You trust no one. You eat only food prepared by your most trusted personal attendants. And even then, you have them tasted first. You sleep in a different room of your quarters each night, a practice designed to foil potential assassins. You use your secret police not just to crush your political enemies, but to spy on your own allies, constantly checking them for any sign of betrayal. This experience of absolute power leading to absolute paranoia is a recurring theme in the history of autocrats. But it was especially acute for powerful eunuchs. Their power, unlike that of a nobleman or a minister, had no legitimate foundation. It was based entirely on the personal favor of one man, the emperor, and this foundation was built on sand. Herein lies the specific, terrifying detail that haunts your every waking moment. The emperor is old, his health is failing, his dragon body is weak, and when he dies, your world will end. The moment the Son of Heaven draws his last breath, your protective shield vanishes. The new emperor, who may be a prince you slighted or whose mother's faction you opposed, will have no reason to favor you. In fact, one of the easiest ways for a new ruler to win popular support and curry favor with the scholar officials is to purge the powerful, corrupt eunuchs of the previous reign. Your downfall is not a possibility. It is a near certainty. This precariance of eunuch power is the subject of a major historical debate. Did powerful eunuchs, knowing their time was limited, act with a kind of desperate, short-term greed, looting the state for all it was worth before the inevitable collapse? This view argues that the very structure of their power encouraged them to be destructive. Since they couldn't build a lasting dynasty, their only incentive was to maximize their personal gain in the present. This moi. La deluge mentality is often cited as a key reason for the downfall of dynasties, where eunuchs gained excessive power. However, a counter-argument suggests that this is too simplistic. Some powerful eunuchs did, in fact, try to manage the imperial succession to ensure their survival. They would involve themselves deeply in the politics of the harem, backing a specific prince and trying to place him on the throne. This was an incredibly dangerous game, as backing the wrong horse meant instant death. This view suggests that they were not simply myopic plunderers, but were capable of long-term strategic thinking, even if it was focused solely on their own self-preservation. The debate is whether the quintessential powerful eunuch was a smash-and-grab robber or a high-stakes kingmaker. You stand before a bronze mirror. The face that looks back at you is pale, lined, and puffy. Your eyes are shadowed with a permanent exhaustion. You see the fear that you try so hard to hide from the world. You have spent your entire life clawing your way to the top of this slippery mountain. Now you are here, and you realize the summit is not a plateau. It is a knife's edge. The wind howls around you, threatening to tear you from your precarious perch. You have schemed. You have betrayed. You have murdered. All to get here. And all you have purchased for yourself is a more elevated and more terrifying form of fear. The silence of your opulent room is deafening. The only sound is the frantic, panicked beating of your own heart. The Emperor's cough is getting worse. The Imperial physicians come and go, their faces grim, their whispers full of herbs and omens that do nothing. You know the end is near. The precarious knife said you have been balancing on for years is beginning to crumble. It is time to prepare for the inevitable. It is time to plan your retirement. For a powerful eunuch, retirement is not a matter of collecting a pension and fading into a quiet life. It is a complex and dangerous strategic retreat, a carefully planned escape from the collapsing world of your power. You have spent years preparing for this moment. Your goal is not to cling to power. You know that is impossible, but to survive its loss. Your first and most important preparation has been your wealth. For decades, you have been siphoning off funds, converting your influence into tangible, hoardable assets. Gold, silver, jade, and pearls. You have not kept all this treasure in the palace or even in your grand mansion, where it could be easily confiscated by the new regime. You have secretly smuggled it out, entrusting it to your adopted son or hiding it in discreet locations, perhaps in the walls of a remote monastery that you have endowed. You are building a lifeboat, and that lifeboat is made of gold. This meticulous financial planning for retirement was a crucial survival strategy for high-ranking eunuchs. They knew their political careers had an expiration date, and they planned accordingly. Their legendary greed was not just for luxurious living in the present, but a pragmatic insurance policy for the future. Now for a specific, and rather cunning, detail of your exit strategy. The illness. As the Emperor's health declines, you will suddenly develop a severe and debilitating illness of your own. You will petition the throne to be allowed to retire due to your failing health. You will complain of dizzy spells, of a weak heart, of the pains in your old bones. You will walk with a new stoop, your face a mask of weary suffering. This is, of course, a performance. It is a preemptive move designed to make you seem like a pathetic, harmless old man, not a threat to the new emperor. It is an attempt to remove yourself from the board before the game changes, to be forgotten rather than purged. A grand funeral for a loyal, deceased eunuch is far preferable to a public execution for a treasonous one. This leads to a fascinating historical debate about the final chapters of these powerful eunuchs' lives. The official histories, written by their enemies, love to focus on the ones who were brutally purged. They tell dramatic stories of their trials, their public humiliations, and their gruesome executions. These stories serve as a moral lesson. This is the inevitable fate of those who usurp power. However, historical reality was likely more varied. For every eunuch who was spectacularly purged, how many managed to successfully execute their exit strategies? How many faded into a quiet, comfortable, and wealthy retirement, their stories simply forgotten by historians who prefer more dramatic narratives? This more nuanced view suggests that many of these eunuchs were highly skilled survivors who knew exactly when to fold their cards. They used their wealth and connections to bribe their way into a peaceful old age. The debate, hampered by a lack of records about those who got away, is over the typicality of these outcomes. Was a violent downfall the norm, or was the quiet, comfortable retirement an underreported but common reality for the cleverest of the bunch? You lie in your bed, your breathing shallow, your face pale. A little rice powder helps with the effect. A junior eunuch, a spy for the crown prince, reports your condition to his master. You know he is a spy. That is why you are putting on this elaborate show for him. You let out a weak, pained groan. You have spent your life in the theater of the court, and this will be your final, and most important, performance. The role you are playing is harmless old man nearing death. The success of this performance will determine whether your final act takes place in a comfortable, quiet monastery or on a bloody execution ground. You close your eyes, feigning a deep and troubled sleep, and you plan your escape. Your final performance is a success. The new emperor, busy consolidating his own power and placating the scholar officials, is content to let you fade away. You are granted permission to retire, to leave the forbidden city for the last time. You are now a ghost, a relic of a bygone era. The question is, where does a ghost go to rest? You do not retire to your grand mansion in the city. It is too conspicuous, too full of memories, and too close to the new centers of power. Like many high-ranking eunuchs before you, you have prepared two primary options for your final years: a private country estate or a Buddhist monastery. The country estate is a vast tract of farmland you purchased years ago under your adopted son's name. It is a world away from the capital, a place of rolling hills, rice paddies, and quiet villages. Here, you are not a eunuch. You are the great and respected old master. The local peasants and tenants work your land. You have built a comfortable, fortified manor house. It is a self-sufficient kingdom in miniature, a place to live out your days in peace and security. The other, and perhaps more common, option is a monastery. For decades, you were a generous patron to a particular Buddhist monastery, located in a scenic, mountainous area outside the city. You funded the construction of a new hall. You paid for the casting of a magnificent bronze Buddha, and you donated land for its upkeep. Now, you are cashing in on that investment. The monastery has a special wing, a luxurious courtyard residence built with your own money, waiting for you. This practice of eunuchs retiring to monasteries is a key historical feature of their life cycle. The monasteries provided a sanctuary, a place where they could escape the political turmoil of the court. But more importantly, it provided a community and a form of long-term care. Here is a specific and poignant detail of this monastic retirement: the formation of eunuch brotherhoods. You are not the only retired eunuch in this monastery. Several of your old colleagues and rivals, others who have successfully navigated their own escapes, also have residences here. You form a strange, final community. You spend your days together, drinking tea, playing chess, and reminiscing about the old days. The bitter rivalries of the past soften into a kind of weary, shared nostalgia. You are the last surviving members of a forgotten court, a group of old men with shared secrets that no one else in the world would understand. You are In essence, a support group for retired autocrats, tending to each other's needs as you all decline into old age. This was a form of chosen family at the very end of life. This has led to a historical debate about the nature of these retirement communities. Were they genuine spiritual sanctuaries, where former men of power sought enlightenment and repentance for their past sins? Some accounts support this view. The retired eunuchs would participate in chanting, study scriptures, and live a quiet, contemplative life. Their retirement was a turn from the worldly to the spiritual. However, a more cynical interpretation sees these monasteries as little more than luxury retirement homes with a religious veneer. The retired eunuchs often continued to meddle in politics from a distance, using the monastery as a safe and respectable base of operations. They brought their wealth, their servants, and their worldly habits with them. The chanting and rituals were just a facade for a life that was still focused on power and comfort. The debate is whether retirement was a true spiritual transformation or simply a change of scenery. You choose the monastery. You sit in a sun-drenched courtyard, a warm blanket on your lap. An old man shuffles over and sits beside you. It is your old rival, Leo. You spent 20 years trying to destroy each other in the palace. Now, he offers you a piece of an orange. You accept it. You sit together in silence, watching the wind rustle the leaves of a bamboo grove. There is nothing left to fight over. The game is over. You are just too old, mutilated man, waiting for the end in a beautiful, peaceful garden that your dirty money paid for. The silence between you is no longer filled with tension, but with a shared, unspoken understanding of a life that was as magnificent as it was monstrous. Your carefully planned retirement, whether in a country villa or a serene monastery, is a testament to your skill as a survivor. But you are one of the lucky ones. For every powerful eunuch who manages a graceful exit, there are many others who are not so fortunate. As you live out your quiet days, you sometimes hear stories, whispers on the wind, about the fates of those who failed. The most common path to ruin is backing the wrong horse in a succession struggle. You remember your old colleague, Wang. He was clever, ambitious, and utterly convinced that the emperor's second son would inherit the throne. He tied his entire political fortune to this prince, becoming his fiercest advocate and channeling vast resources to his faction. But when the old emperor died, it was the third son who was named his successor. Wang's fate was sealed in that instant. The new emperor's first act was to eliminate the supporters of his rivals. Wang was arrested. He was not charged with treason. That would have required a lengthy and public trial. He was charged with corruption, a much easier and more flexible accusation. His grand mansion was ransacked, his vast, hidden wealth confiscated undated to the new emperor's treasury. His adopted son was stripped of his titles and exiled to a remote frontier province. This patterned a new ruler, purging the powerful eunuchs of the previous reign, is a constant, bloody rhythm in the history of the court. It was a brutally effective way for a new emperor to signal a break with the past, consolidate his power, and fill his depleted coffers all at once. The fallen eunuch served as a convenient and often popular scapegoat for all the problems of the previous administration. Now for the specific and grim detail of the downfall. After being stripped of his wealth and power, a disgraced eunuch like Wang was often not executed immediately. A more cruel and humiliating fate awaited him. He might be demoted to the lowest possible rank and assigned to the most demeaning job imaginable. Wang, who once advised the emperor and terrified ministers, was made a tender of the palace sewers. He spent his days in the dark, foul-smelling tunnels beneath the forbidden city, shoveling filth. He was kept alive as a walking ghost, a cautionary tale for any other eunuch who dared to dream too big. He became a living symbol of how far and how fast one could fall. After a few months of this soul-crushing labor, he would die of disease, or perhaps take his own life. This leads to a historical debate about the agency of eunuchs in their own downfall. The traditional narrative often portrays them as helpless victims of circumstance, their fates entirely dependent on the whims of the emperor. When their patron died, their own political death was an inevitability, a simple consequence of the system. However, a more nuanced view argues that these powerful eunuchs were not passive victims, but active players who understood the risks of the game they were playing. They were not naive. They knew that their power was temporary and their position was perilous. Their political maneuvering, their attempts to influence the succession, were not signs of foolishness but acts of desperate, high-stakes gambling. They knew the potential outcomes: a few more years of supreme power if their chosen candidate won, or total ruin if he lost. In this view, their downfall was not a random accident, but the predictable result of a calculated risk that failed to pay off. The debate is whether they were tragic figures swept away by tides they couldn't control, or high-rolling gamblers who simply, and catastrophically, lost their final bet. You lie on your comfortable recliner in the monastery, listening to the soothing chant of the monks, but the peace is disturbed by a memory of Wang. You remember his arrogant smile, the way he commanded a room, and you remember the last time you saw him. Just before you retired, you saw him from a distance, a broken old man in a filthy tunic, pushing a wheelbarrow. He looked up and his eyes met yours. There was no hatred in them. There was no anger. There was only a profound, bottomless emptiness. You had played the same game. You had both gambled with your lives. The wheel of fortune had spun. You had won. He had lost. There was no other logic to it. You close your eyes and try to force the image from your mind. But it lingers, a chilling reminder that your own peaceful end is not a right, but a privilege, and a remarkably rare one at that. You are very old now. The line between waking and sleeping has begun to blur. Your days are a slow, gentle rhythm of tea, soft food, and long naps in a sunlit corner of the monastery garden. The great storms of your life, the terror of the knife RS room, the intrigues of the court, the paranoia of power, have all passed. You are left now in the quiet aftermath, with nothing but your own memories for company. As you drift in and out of consciousness, your life plays back to you in a series of vivid, disconnected fragments. You see the face of your mother, her eyes filled with a grief you were too young to understand. You feel the cold, slimy mud of the Emperor's lotus pond on your ankles. You taste the coppery fear in your mouth as you test a dish for poison. You hear the satisfying crack of a rival's spirit breaking under interrogation. You see the moonlight on the floor of the long gallery, and you feel the phantom presence of ghosts at your shoulder. You have lived a life of almost unimaginable strangeness, a life that defies easy summary. You were a slave who became a master, a prisoner who ruled an empire from his cell. You were a man who possessed everything on nothing. This profound sense of contradiction, of a life built on a fundamental negation, is the defining feature of your existence. You look down at your own hands. They are old now, the skin thin and spotted, the joints swollen. These are the hands that once swept the palace courtyards. These are the hands that dressed an emperor in his dragon robes. These are the hands that signed death warrants. They are the hands of a servant in the hands of a king. They are the hands of a monster in the hands of a lonely, frightened boy. Now for a specific, and deeply philosophical detail of your final reflections. You think about your bow, your treasure, for your entire life. It has been your most important possession, the symbol of your sacrifice and your key to a whole afterlife. Your adopted son has already made the arrangements, bribing the right people in the palace to have it released upon your death so it can be buried with you. But now, at the very end, a strange and unsettling thought occurs to you. What if it didn't matter? What if the wholeness you have been chasing your entire life was a lie? A story the IFRS told the little boys to make the horror bearable. The thought is profoundly terrifying, but also, in a strange way, liberating. If there is no restored manhood in the next life, then the only life that matters is this one. And what was this life? This brings us to the final, and perhaps most profound, historical debate about the legacy of palace eunuchs. How should we, in the end, judge them? Were they, as the traditional histories insist, a destructive and corrupting force, a cancer on the body politic whose influence invariably signaled dynastic decline? This view sees their story as a clear moral lesson, a tragedy of ambition and perversion. Or should we adopt a more modern, post-structuralist perspective? This view would argue that eunuchs were a third gender, a unique social category created by the specific power dynamics of the imperial court. They were outsiders who, because of their unique position, were able to challenge and subvert the traditional Confucian norms of masculinity, family, and power. Their story is not a simple morality play, but a complex and fascinating case study in the fluidity of gender, the nature of power, and the ability of human beings to adapt and create meaning in the most unnatural of circumstances. The debate is whether we should see you as a villain, a victim, or something far more complex and interesting, a pioneer of an alternative, albeit brutal, way of life. Use it in your chair, the sun warm on your face. A young novice monk brings you a cup of tea. He is young, full, and full of life. He will grow up, perhaps marry, have children, and die. His life a simple, unbroken circle. Your life was a jagged, broken line, a path of such bizarre twists and turns that it seems like a fever dream. You have known the lowest depths of poverty and the highest peaks of power. You have been feared and reviled. You have been a kingmaker and a king's servant. Was it worth it? The question hangs in the quiet air of the garden, vast, unanswerable, and eternal. You close your eyes. You do not know. The world has become very small. It has shrunk to the size of your bed, to the space between one breath and the next. The memories no longer come in sharp fragments, but as a soft, continuous, silent film playing behind your closed eyelids. The faces of emperors, of rivals, of your own mother, all merge into one. The sounds of the palace, the gongs, the whispers, the rustle of silk, have faded completely. Your adopted son is here. He holds a cup of water to your lips, but you can no longer swallow. He is a good son. He has managed your fortune well. He will ensure you have a proper burial. He will burn incense at your grave. Your name, at least for a generation, will not be forgotten. It is the most you could have hoped for. You have achieved the only kind of immortality available to you. Your final arrangements are all in place. The monastery has a plot of land set aside for its eunuch patrons. It is a quiet, peaceful spot on a hillside overlooking a bamboo forest. Your coffin, made of the finest, most fragrant wood, is ready. Most importantly, a small, sealed jar rests in a box at the foot of your bed. Your bow, After a lifetime of separation, it has been retrieved. It will be placed in the coffin with you, the final piece of a puzzle that can never be truly whole again. This final act of recombination, of burying the eunuch with his treasure, is the ultimate historical testament to the psychological importance of the practice. It was the closing of a circle, the fulfillment of a promise made in a dark, bloody room so many decades ago. It was an attempt to impose an narrative of restoration and wholeness onto a life defined by its very lack. As your breathing becomes shallow, a final detail of your long life surfaces. You remember the small, green praying mantis you kept as a secret pet when you were a boy. You remember the simple, uncomplicated joy of watching it, the flicker of connection to another living creature. And you realize, with a clarity that is only possible at the very end of life, that in a lifetime spent chasing power, acquiring wealth, and navigating the labyrinth of the court, that small, secret moment of tenderness was perhaps the only thing that was ever truly, authentically yours. This brings us to our last historical debate. What is the ultimate meaning of a life like yours? Is it a story about power, about gender, about politics, or is it something simpler? The traditional historical focus is on the macro level, the impact of eunuchs on the state, on the economy, on politics. These are important questions, but another way to view your life is as a profound and tragic human story about the search for connection. Stripped of the ability to form a traditional family, you and your brethren were forced to find connection elsewhere, in the fierce loyalty to a master, in the paternal bond with an apprentice, in the camaraderie of the dormitory, in the shared experience of a monastic retirement, or even in the secret affection for a tiny insect. Perhaps the grand narrative of eunuch power and corruption has obscured a more intimate story, a lifelong, desperate, and deeply human quest to find a place to belong in a world that had tried its best to make you an outcast. The debate is whether the engine of your life was ambition or a profound and thwarted loneliness. Your last breath is a quiet, gentle sigh. It is the sigh of a long-held tension, finally being released. The great, complex machine of your life, a life of pain and power, of fear and finery, has at last come to a stop. The story is over. You are free. And so, the story ends. The tough, smelly, and unbelievably resilient life of the Spartan soldier fades back into the mists of history. The dust settles over that simple, unmarked grave in the Laconian soil. The sharp edges of that world, the icy river, the taste of blood soup, the sting of the whip, begin to soften as you drift further away from it, back into the quiet comfort of your own bed. The sounds of the agoge fade, replaced by the gentle hum of the fan in your room. The hard ground of the barracks melts away into the softness of your mattress. You can let go of that tension now. There are no more inspections to pass, no more battles to fight. There is only the stillness of the night and the gentle pull of sleep. Feel the weight of your own body, safe and warm under the blankets, a world away from that single, scratchy red cloak. You are no longer in Sparta. You are here. Now, in this peaceful moment, let the last vestiges of that hard, ancient world dissolve, leaving behind only the quiet rhythm of your own breathing, a soft and steady beat in the deep silence of the night.